Welcome to Train Signal. This is the Managing Internet Explorer lesson in the Windows 7 Administration Training course. In this lesson, we'll discuss a number of features of Internet Explorer 8, which is the default version of Internet Explorer included in Windows 7. We'll start by discussing Internet Explorer 8's compatibility mode, which allows the browser to display web pages as if it were using IE7. From there, we'll take up the topic of configuring IE security settings, followed quickly by IE protected mode. Next, we'll talk about using add-ons and search providers to extend the capability of Internet Explorer. After that, we'll move on to two in-private technologies. First, in-private browsing, next, in-private filtering. We'll also talk about Internet Explorer's Smart Screen filter, which can be used to protect your organization from visiting malicious websites. Second to last, we'll talk about IE's pop-up blocker, which can help prevent annoying pop-ups as you browse the internet. And we'll wrap up the lesson by talking about Internet Explorer certificates and how Internet Explorer handles secure sockets layer certificates. The Global Mantic application group has developed a number of web-based applications that only work in Internet Explorer. Because of this, and because the organization plans to standardize on Windows 7, the CIO has made Internet Explorer the corporate standard at Global Mantic. Windows 7 provides excellent centralized management for IE's capabilities, and some of this will be used to make sure the Internet Explorer settings meet corporate security standards, including disallowing the use of unapproved add-ins for IE, and making sure the compatibility mode is properly configured for applications created by the Global Mantic application group. This will give that group time to update their web-based applications for compatibility with Internet Explorer 8. Global Mantic also wants to make sure that users understand the Smart Screen technology included in IE 8 to help them prevent malware infestations on computers in the organization. As I mentioned, compatibility mode is a way that IE 8 can be forced to display web pages as if they were being viewed in IE 7. Not all websites display properly in IE 8, which is the default version of Internet Explorer that ships with Windows 7. These websites are then forced to display under IE 7's web browsing standards rather than IE 8's. Windows Update includes lists of websites that actually work best under compatibility mode. When configured, these websites will then be forced to compatibility mode rather than the user having to choose it themselves. There are a number of compatibility mode group policies available at Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Internet Explorer, Compatibility View. Global Mantic needs to make sure that the site apps.globalmantic.com displays in compatibility mode because this is the site that's used by the Global Mantic Application Support Group. I'm now going to move over to one of the desktop systems we've been using in this course, and we're going to add this site to compatibility mode. Here we are on GM7075, which we've been using throughout this course, and there are two ways that we can add a site to the compatibility view list. First, if we start in an Explorer, one of the toolbars that we see has the word Tools on it. And if you go to the Tools menu and choose Compatibility View Settings, you have an opportunity to add a website to the Compatibility View settings so that those websites will be forced to display in Compatibility View. So if we add apps.globalmantic.com and click Add, you'll notice that these are sites that have been added to Compatibility View on this computer. While we're here, notice that there are a couple of checkboxes at the bottom of the screen as well. The first one says Include Updated Website List from Microsoft, which I'll select. This will allow Internet Explorer to use the Windows Update-based Compatibility View lists to update Compatibility View settings. Also, would you like to display internal intranet sites in Compatibility View? Or would you like to display all websites in Compatibility View? So basically, every website you visit would be viewed in IE7 mode. I'll just select the first checkbox and click Close. Now, right now, you don't see much of anything. There's nothing really all that exciting on the screen that has to do with compatibility mode. If you go to the Tools menu, you'll notice that this site doesn't even have an option for Compatibility View. The reason is because this site doesn't have anything on the page that IE detects as being potentially problematic with the page layout, so there's really no need for the site to be viewed in compatibility view. But if we go to another site, msn.com, this one always displays in compatibility view because of the fact that it's on this list. So I'll remove it from this list. Notice that when you go to a page that's not on the list, that msn.com is not on this list, you now get a little broken piece of paper here. And when you hover over it, it tells you that by clicking this, you'll go to compatibility view. And it'll tell you that this site is now running in compatibility view. Now, the page layout may or may not change. It really depends on how the page is designed by the web designer on the other end. In this case, the MSN site really doesn't change much, actually at all. But it shows in compatibility view when you click that button. Another way to handle this on a more broad basis is to use group policy. By going to Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Internet Explorer Compatibility View, you'll get a number of policy items that you can use to set compatibility view policies throughout the organization. One of the policies is called Use Policy List of Internet Explorer 7 Sites. This policy setting allows you to add specific sites that must be viewed in IE7 compatibility view. When enabled, users will be able to add and remove sites from the list, but they may not remove the sites you specify. So if you add the GlobalMantics apps.globalmantics.com sites, users will not be able to remove that from compatibility view, no matter how hard they try. When this setting is not enabled, or if it's disabled, the user can add and remove sites at will, including ones that you may have specified at installation time. You can also completely turn off compatibility view altogether, if you want. You can turn on IE standards mode for local intranet. Turn off the compatibility view button that you saw up on the command bar before. Decide whether or not you want to include website lists from Microsoft via Windows Update, or use that policy list of Internet Explorer 7 sites. So if I open this box, if I wanted to add a site, I would choose Enabled, and then click the Show button next to List of Sites. Here, I would add apps.globalmantics.com, and click OK. Notice that this is supported on at least IE8. This is a brand new policy included with IE8. And you have to add each entry manually. And then you'll notice this policy is then enabled. When it comes to security, Internet Explorer has come a long way over the past few years. It used to be that Internet Explorer security was a lot like Swiss cheese. A lot of stuff got through, but Microsoft has been taking great pains to secure Internet Explorer and make it a pretty secure browser these days. There are a number of predefined security levels that are used in Internet Explorer 8 that you should understand. There are actually 5 of them that we're going to discuss in this lesson. The first one is a high security level. In this case, just about everything you can do is disallowed except browsing the web. Next, we have what's called a medium-high level, and this is appropriate for most web browsing activities. In medium-high, the user is prompted before downloading potentially unsafe content. In other words, they're told, hey, this is potentially unsafe content, do you really want to do this? If you're at the high security level, on the other hand, they wouldn't even be able to do that. They would just block the content. Any ActiveX controls that are attempted to be downloaded will be disallowed. Signed ActiveX controls are allowed. Again, at the high level, that's not allowed either. And in medium-high, per application override settings that disable ActiveX warnings in certain situations are not allowed. So basically, there's times when ActiveX warnings are disabled, but this is not allowed in the medium-high setting. At the medium setting, the user is still prompted before downloading unsafe content, and unsigned ActiveX controls are not downloaded. However, per application override settings that disable ActiveX warnings in certain situations are allowed. in this case. And medium-low settings are appropriate for most intranet-based sites, that is, internal sites like GlobalMantics. Most content will be just run without users being prompted. And for an internal site, that really sort of makes sense. In general, internal sites are going to be sort of trusted, so you want to allow users to just get their jobs done without being bugged by a lot of pop-ups. However, in this case, unsigned ActiveX controls are still not going to be downloaded. And in the low security setting, most content can be run without the user being prompted, and all active content can be run, including unsigned ActiveX controls. This is appropriate for only the most trusted sites out there. And we're back over at GM7075. I'm going to go to the Start menu, Control Panel, and I'm going to choose Internet Options. From the resulting Internet Properties page, I'll click the Security tab, on which you're going to see those 4 zones we just talked about at the very top of the window. Immediately below that, you'll see security levels, and here's a medium-high security level. I have the Internet option, or the Internet zone selected right now, and as I mentioned before, that's a medium-high security level by default. If I click Local Intranet, that goes to a medium-low. Trusted Sites is a medium, and Restricted Sites is at high, and you can't change it. Going back to the Internet zone, you'll notice that the only 3 options that I have are medium-high, medium, and high. So you actually can't go below medium in the Internet zone. If you need to have a site that is a lower security level than medium, you'll need to add it to either Local Intranet or Trusted Sites, and then lower the security on the Trusted Sites zone if you need to have a lower security level for a particular site. Speaking of sites, if you go to the Trusted Sites zone, you'll notice that there's a Sites button here that's lit up, on which you can add sites that should be included in this Trusted Sites zone. So I'll add trainsignal.com to the Trusted Sites zone and click Close. Then I'm going to go to the Restricted Sites zone. I'm going to add a site that's restricted. Now, this doesn't mean that I can't browse to that site. It just means that it's under heavy restriction. There's a lot of things that don't work. Now, if I open up my web browser, you're going to notice that I'll go directly to TrainSignal. And at the very low bottom of the page, you're going to see that I'm in the Trusted Sites zone. If I wanted to, I could double-click this, and it would open up the security properties page for me, but I don't need to do that right now. If I now go to CNN.com, you'll notice that it's restricted sites. That's because I added this site to the restricted sites list. And if I go to some other site, such as IBM.com, you'll notice that I'm in the Internet zone. So, if you're having trouble with a particular site for some reason, maybe you're not getting active content, make sure you haven't accidentally added it to the restricted sites zone. That's a way you can check, is by looking at the bottom of the page here. Now, if I go back over to the control panel that we were looking at, you'll notice that you can also manually adjust the settings for each level by clicking the Custom Level button. There are dozens of settings here that you can choose from to enable or disable or have you be prompted for particular items. For example, for downloading signed ActiveX controls, you'll always be prompted. For downloading unsigned ActiveX controls in the Internet zone, it's disabled. And you'll see that there are some recommended items. Now, group policy can also be used to manage security policies for Internet Explorer. You'll notice that I've gone to Computer Configuration, Administrative Tools, Windows Components, Internet Explorer, Internet Control Panel, Security page. And here you're going to see that there are a number of zone folders that basically match the zones we just looked at to a point, and items that you can configure for each one of those zones. If I go to the Internet Zone item, all of those items we looked at on the Custom Configuration tab, you can modify here. Now, by doing it on the Custom Configuration tab we just looked at before, you're going to modify the settings for that one machine. By making those setting changes via a domain-based group policy that you attach to Active Directory, then you will be able to enable those organizational policies, those security policies, throughout the organization. Internet Explorer 7 added the concept of what's called protected mode, and that mode carries over to Internet Explorer 8. This makes it more difficult for websites to install malicious software on your machine. It allows administrators to install desirable ActiveX controls and add-ons. By default, protected mode is enabled in the Internet and restricted sites zones in Internet Explorer, but it's disabled in the local intranet in the trusted sites zones. I'm going to go back over to that machine we were looking at, and we'll take a look at this. I'm going to go back to the control panel item, Internet Options, Security. And you'll notice that for the Internet zone, Enable Protected Mode is selected. For the intranet zone, it is not selected, nor is it for trusted sites, but it is for restricted sites. Protected mode makes it harder for websites to interact between one another that could compromise the security of your computer. In Internet Explorer, it was actually kind of annoying what was allowed to happen with protected mode. If you had a web browsing session open and you tried to open a site that required protected mode in another tab, you had to open up a whole new browser session. That behavior is now gone in IE 8. Protected mode now works between tabs, and it's a lot easier to use. Microsoft and other parties provide add-ons that extend the functionality of Internet Explorer. There are add-ons available for a number of different categories, including new search engines. GlobalMantics uses the New York Times search engine when they're looking for information about the company and the news. So we'll add that search engine to IE in an example in just a few minutes. As is the case in most things related to Windows 7, you can use group policy to manage Internet Explorer, including what can be added and what cannot be added to the operating system. The GlobalMantics marketing department uses Twitter extensively in their social media efforts, and they are going to add an Internet Explorer add-on to streamline the Twitter update process. So we're going to go back over to one of our GlobalMantics desktops right now, and we're going to add a Twitter add-in that will help the GlobalMantics marketing department. We're also going to add the New York Times search engine to Internet Explorer. Here we are back at our GlobalMantics desktop. Now I'm going to start Internet Explorer. I'm going to go to the Tools menu, and I'm going to choose Manage Add-ons. You're going to see that there are already some add-ons that are available in Internet Explorer. Right now we have only the Bing search provider, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for more search providers. We want to add the New York Times search provider to Internet Explorer. So I'll click the Find More Search Providers link, which will open up a website to ieaddons.com. And as you can see, the New York Times Instant Search is actually one of the items that's available right here. So I'll click the Add to Internet Explorer button, and you're going to see that it's asked me if I want to add a search provider. So, do I want to add the search provider? I'll just simply say Add. Now, I'm going to go back up to the search box up here, and I'm going to type GlobalMantics. You'll notice, however, that there's the Bing search engine, and then there's another one right here, the New York Times search engine. Right from that box, I can click New York Times, and it will go and try to search New York Times for GlobalMantics. So from here, with one quick click, you can search different search engines without having to do a whole lot. And that's by virtue of the fact that we now have an additional add-in for Internet Explorer. But if I go to the add-ons page now, you'll see we have two search providers and there's a listing order. If I had other ones, then you can change the listing order if you like. Move up, move down, move up, move down, and you can see what's going on there. Now for the Twitter thing, I want to go and I want to add an accelerator. An accelerator, it provides a quick action on a web page. In fact, if I go to a page that I had, well, let me close this. If I go to a page here and I right-click, when I right-click something, you're going to see that there's some accelerators here. I can blog about this, I can email it, translate it, or any of the above with all accelerators that I have installed. Well, I want to go back to my add-ons page, and I'm going to look for additional accelerators. Specifically, I want something to do with Twitter. So I'm going to type Twitter in the search box. And I'm going to choose to share via Twitter using Bitly. GlobalMantics uses Bitly to shorten links, and then they go to Twitter. So I'll add this to Internet Explorer. And I'm going to make it my default provider for this accelerator category. This is going to be the Share Accelerator. And I'll click Add. Now, when I right-click a link on the page, you're going to notice that there's another option available, Twitter via Bitly. So by clicking that link, I choose Twitter via Bitly, and you'll notice that it takes me to Bitly to shorten the link that I just created. The GlobalMantics marketing department uses this when they're looking for news about GlobalMantics that they want to share with the world on Twitter. So they'll right-click the link that has to do with GlobalMantics, and then they'll send it to Bitly for dissemination via Twitter. Looking back over at the group policies that are associated with accelerators and searches and add-ons, you'll notice that if I go to Internet Explorer, there's an accelerators category. I can completely turn off accelerators by choosing the Turn Off Accelerators category. If I enable Turn Off Accelerators, users will not be able to access any of my accelerators. I can choose to deploy default accelerators. And if I enable that, where's the list of the accelerators that I want to install? The Use Policy Accelerators option restricts the list of accelerators that people can use to only the ones that are set via group policy. So if you use group policy to push out some accelerators, and then you enable Use Policy Accelerators, only the accelerators that you send through group policy will be available to the users, and they will not be able to add more. Under Security Features, you'll notice there's an item called Add-on Management. If I choose Add-on List, this is going to allow me to manage a list of add-ons that are allowed or denied by Internet Explorer. Add-ins are things like ActiveX controls, toolbars, browser helper objects, and things like that. You can choose to deny all add-ons if you like, but you don't have to. You can also choose to deny all add-ons unless specifically allowed in the add-on list. Kind of like accelerators. If you have a list of add-ons that you're allowing via group policy, you would deny the rest of them by enabling this policy. Have you ever gone to a web browser and a public web browser and didn't want to have to worry about leaving tracks behind like cookies and things like that? Or temporary internet files or history information? Internet Explorer 8 includes a feature called in-private browsing, and GlobalMantics wants to make sure that their users understand in-private browsing, so when they happen to go to, say, an airport kiosk or a public library to get internet access and connect to a GlobalMantics resource, that they don't leave behind some information that may be used by a hacker to gain access to GlobalMantics systems. Basically, in-private browsing prevents Internet Explorer from storing data about a browsing session. This can help prevent anyone else who might use the same computer from seeing sites you visited and other potentially private information. When you're using in-private browsing, toolbars and extensions are disabled by default. And it's only in effect during the time that you use the in-private window. And you'll see that in action in just a minute. And as you might expect, there is a group policy setting associated with in-private browsing that we'll take a look at in just a minute. And here we are back at GlobalMantics. And this time I want to open up an in-private session. So if I go to the Safety button and I choose in-private browsing, you're going to notice now that I see a little in-private mode up here. When in-private browsing is turned on, you will always see this in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. And it'll tell you exactly what's going on. information about your browsing session is not going to be saved. Now, that also means that when you go to particular websites, you're not going to have your cookies available, so you'll have to do things like CNN, like set your edition preference over and over again. So even if I set the edition preference to international, I'll make that my default. The next time I go back, it's going to go back to US. And the reason for that is because no cookie was stored, telling CNN that I had set my edition preference to international. In-private browsing can be very good, again, at these public situations where you don't want your personal information left behind. Now, as I mentioned, there are also group policies associated with in-private browsing. Internet Explorer in private mode. And you have an option here to either, you can completely turn, that's filtering. You can turn off in-private browsing if you like. We'll be talking about in-private filtering in just a minute. It's very different. And in this case, you would not allow your users to use this in-private mode. On the desktop PCs in your organization, you may want to turn off in-private browsing so users' activity continues to be logged even if it's just local on their machine. You can also set it to disable toolbars and extensions when in-private browsing starts. If you want, you can allow these things to load, but you don't have to. One thing I want to mention that's very important is when you're using in-private browsing, it doesn't mean that there can't be something further down the line on the network that's still watching all your browser traffic. In-private browsing pertains only to the local PC. If your organization has some kind of web content filter or web tracking device, that will still work, and it will still get linked back to the desktop PC from whence the data came. Whereas in-private browsing enables a user to go out and browse the web without leaving any tracks, in-private filtering is a little bit more granular, although it pertains to a broader swath of the internet. This helps protect users from common browsing tracking, such as that performed by third-party advertising networks. When you go to a website, you're often subjected to a barrage of ads that happen to be targeted at the kind of content you happen to be looking at. You can disable some of that behavior by using in-private filtering. Users can decide what can be shared and with whom. However, GlobalMantics wants to make sure that users can browse the web and get work done, so they're going to disable in-private filtering because the company's not that concerned about these third-party advertising networks. So we're going to go over to the GlobalMantics desktop and disable in-private filtering. Start in an Explorer, and if you're interested, go to the Safety tab, click Safety, and choose in-private filtering. The first time you do this, it'll pop up a window like the one you see on your screen that says, when you visit a website that contains content from another provider, some information about your visit is automatically sent to that provider. As you continue to browse the web from the same provider, they could start building a profile for how you browse the web. The in-private filtering technology helps you control which providers receive information about your websites. You can also completely block your information if you like, or you can decide who should and should not receive the information. So you can choose, let me choose which providers receive my information, and this opens up the in-private filtering settings window that you see on your screen right now. You can choose to automatically block everything, choose content to block or allow, or just simply turn off the content, the in-private filtering, I should say. In our case, we want to turn off in-private filtering, so I've chosen the off option, and then nothing will happen, basically. As I browse the web, all of my behavior now is just going to continue to be tracked and for marketing purposes for other companies. GlobalMantics isn't that concerned about this, so we're going to leave it off for this example. But one thing that's important to know is the difference between in-private browsing and in-private filtering. In-private browsing helps you not leave tracks behind on your computer. In-private filtering is a way you can not leave tracks behind on other people's computers as you browse the web. One great feature about IE8 is called the Smart Screen Filter. This looks for known or suspected phishing websites or sites that might harm your computer through the installation of malware. Phishing websites are those ones that look like real bank sites, for example, and try to grab your personal information by faking you out. Microsoft maintains a list of sites for its Smart Screen filter, and this site list is updated on an hourly basis. Smart Screen also scans downloaded files and blocks the download if there's a known risk for a particular file. You can also perform a manual check of a site using Smart Screen. Smart Screen provides users with a warning that a site might not be safe. For example, here's a sample site that you can use to see if Smart Screen works. If you try to visit 207.68.169.170/contoso/enrolloff.html, you're going to get something like this. You're going to get a screen that says, "This website has been reported as unsafe. We recommend you do not continue to this website. Do you want to go to your home page instead? This website's been reported to Microsoft." And if you click the More Information button, you can figure out why this website's been reported. This is a phishing threat. This is a phishing website that impersonates a trusted website to try to trick you into revealing personal or financial information. I highly recommend you always use Smart Screen everywhere you go. This is a great thing. This is a nice red screen that tells users, this is bad, don't do this. However, users can disregard and continue to the site if they want to. Now I'm going to go over to a Global Mantis computer and show you how you can initiate a Smart Screen scan on your own. I've already loaded the CNN.com website on this machine. If I go to the safety option in Internet Explorer, I can choose Smart Screen Filter and check this website. By doing so, it will ask Microsoft if this website is good or legit, or if it's been reported. And if it hasn't, then you'll get a screen like this. However, if you're at a known phishing website, what you should do is go to the Safety tab, Smart Screen Filter, Report Unsafe Website. When you do so, you'll get a screen that looks like this. You're reporting to CNN.com, and you can say, "I think this is a phishing website," or "it contains malicious software." Then you have to provide some other information, and then click Submit. I'm not going to because I'm pretty sure that CNN.com is not a phishing website. And that's how Smart Screen works. If you want to, you can also turn off the Smart Screen filter. And then when you do so, you'll get a screen kind of like what you get when you turn off the firewall or Windows updates. It's recommended that you use the Smart Screen filter, but if you like, you can turn it off. I'm not going to say too much about pop-up blocking because I think this is a pretty well-known technology at this point. Pop-ups are not very popular, but they are used on websites still pretty frequently. In a lot of cases, they have value. And some of them have to be allowed. So when you go to some websites, you have to click a button to get a login box, whatever. You need to allow pop-ups. You can allow pop-ups on a site-by-site or a per-zone basis. It's important to understand that pop-ups are always allowed in the default local intranet and trusted site zone configurations. So if you've added a site to either the local intranet or trusted site zones, then pop-ups are going to be allowed. There is a pop-up blocker setting in Windows that allows configuration of this security feature, and we'll take a look at that right now. Here we are back over on the Global Mantis desktop. Now I'm going to go to the Tools menu in Internet Explorer and choose Pop-up Blocker Settings. You can decide which websites you want to allow pop-ups to take place on. So for example, if you type www.cnn.com, you can add that site to a list of sites that are allowed to pop windows up on your computer. There's also a blocking level that you have here. From a settings perspective, you can add individual sites to the screen, and you can make other changes here. So you can put a high setting, if you like, which blocks every single pop-up that comes up. You can block most automatic pop-ups, or you can allow pop-ups from only secure sites, but the low setting. The default is medium, and that's where we're going to leave it for Global Mantics. The final topic we're going to touch on in this lesson is the managing of IE certificates. We're not going to really get into managing them per se. We're not going to import and export and create them and all that stuff. But we want to make sure that you understand what the purpose of an SSL certificate is, or a Secure Sockets Layer certificate. SSL is really the foundation of web security. When you go to a bank site, you always look for that HTTPS or the lock on the toolbar. HTTPS is a secure HTTP transport that uses SSL as the underlying encryption mechanism. SSL provides trusted, secure, end-to-end communications encryption so users can comfortably share personal information, including things like social security numbers and credit card information, on secure transactions. To help protect users, IE blocks access to SSL-protected websites when things don't look right. This could mean that the address doesn't match that of the SSL certificate, and we'll see that in action in just a minute. Or perhaps the certificate has expired, or it's been revoked, or the certificate is not trusted back to what's called a root certificate. A root certificate is the grand poobah of all certificates, and if your certificate that's being used does not somehow link all the way back up to a certificate chain to a root certificate, then there's a break in the chain, and that's not a secure communication. So let's take a look at what happens when you browse to a website when there's a certificate name mismatch. I'm going to browse to the site you see on your screen, and you're going to see what happens. Basically, the identity of this website or the integrity of this connection cannot be verified. The security certificate is from a trusted certifying authority, and the security certificate date is valid. However, the name on the security certificate is invalid or does not match the name of the site. What this could mean is that someone has installed an invalid or fake certificate with a bad name. So you want to be very careful about browsing to this site because it could mean bad things. So you can view the certificate to see exactly what the deal is. In this case, I'm browsing to an IP address, but the certificate does not have all that information. It's looking for a name of a system. In this case, mail1.westminstermo, a number of names, mail1.westminstermo.edu. So if it doesn't have that name, then the certificate's not really valid, although the communication is still encrypted. So it's important to understand that as well. So I'm going to decide I do want to proceed. And then you're going to get another warning that says there's a problem with this website's security certificate. The security certificate presented by this website was issued for a different website address. Again, be very careful answering continue to this website because you don't know exactly what could be going on. Now, when you do click continue, you're going to see that the bar up at the top of the screen is bright red. And that's telling you that this site is encrypted, or this communication is encrypted, but there's something wrong with the certificate. And you can get information about the certificate again by clicking the certificate error link and clicking view certificate, which gives you that information that you saw before. Here's the certification path that I talked about. You have to have information all the way back to a root certificate. And then here's the details for that particular certificate. In Internet Explorer, you have an option to mess around with certificates if you want. By opening up the Internet Properties page, you can go to the Content panel, and you'll see a Certificates option. Now, most users are never ever going to use this option. You, as a Windows 7 administrator, might use this option once in a blue moon. This is going to be handled a lot more by network and server admins, but it's important to know that if you have to mess with certificates, you do so from the Internet Options page, it's the Content tab on Windows 7. And here's where you're going to see information about the certificates that are installed on the machine. The trusted root certificate authorities. In most cases, there's not a big deal here anymore. If you go with a reputable vendor for secure sockets layer certificates or SSL certificates, you're never going to have a problem here. So they're all going to go back to a trusted root. There's trusted publishers, and then there's untrusted publishers. We covered a lot of items to do with Internet Explorer in this lesson, including compatibility mode, configuring of IE security settings, including zones and particular security levels. You learned about what IE protected mode is, and you learned about how to manage IE add-ons and search providers. You looked at both of the in-private techniques, including browsing and filtering, and we saw Smart Screen Filter in action and why it's so important. You got a peek at IE's pop-up blocker settings, and then we looked at why SSL certificates are so important to a safe browsing environment. If you're interested in more information about security zones, here's a supporting resource that I found pretty helpful. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.